Torn from the fiery pages of the mightiest annals of the West comes the supreme saga in the great tradition of frontier drama.
Many consider Blazing Saddles a groundbreaking comedy that parodies Hollywood and American society norms. However, some issues and secrets beneath its brilliant satire have been kept out of the public eye. Blazing Saddles' production wasn't as easy as it appeared, with problems with censorship and unanticipated casting choices among the challenges. What did audiences not know? You'll learn how the events that occurred off-screen, just as much as on-screen, influenced this movie's history as we go into the little-known details that even ardent fans might not be aware of. Keep checking back. The most unexpected appearance. It's common knowledge that movie premieres are glitzy events filled with A-listers appearing out of beautiful limousines and wearing their most costly bespoke suits. However, guests arrive on horseback for this particular picture to correspond with the film's concept. Anything that makes it easier for you to sleep. After Brooks screened the film for Warner Brothers, Chief Executive Ted Ashley expressed dissatisfaction with the decision. Ashley surrounded Brooks and gave him the following orders. You have to do the following. Take out the N-word, take out the bean scene, punching a horse, the Lily von Stupp, and the black sheriff saying something along the lines of, "You're sucking my arm," or any other similar phrase. Brooks' response was, "Great, you have to get rid of everything." When he was instructed, "They're all out." He did not comply with the instructions and instead threw away all the notes and went away. Down you go. In the next scene, the boorish Mongo parked his horse in a no-parking zone, and then he was accosted by another horse rider. Film enthusiasts will remember this moment quite well. Subsequently, Mongo confidently approached the horse and destroyed it, causing both of them to fall to the ground due to his actions. It would appear that Brooks did not merely concoct this particular segment out of thin air. Instead, it was a real-life story that he'd once heard from his former boss, Sid Caesar, which served as another source of inspiration for him. Having a poor taste. Some viewers felt Mongo's knockout punch scenario was inappropriate, even though it was amusing. Although no horses were hurt, animal rights advocates were outraged by how the horse was treated. In actuality, there were no horses damaged. On the other hand, it was said that a less violent scenario could have been developed rather than the one suggested in the movie, which would not have caused other people to acquire any ideas. To capture the sequence, the producers were fortunate enough to use horses trained to fall on command, so they didn't have to cause any harm to any animals. Getting the boot. Gig Young portrayed the role of the Waco Kid during the initial filming round. The moment in which the Waco Kid was seen hanging from his bed while intoxicated and berating Bart was one of the earliest scenes that was shot. Upon witnessing the clips, you might feel that Young is an incredible actor because he portrays drunkenness well. On the other hand, the reality was that he was genuinely intoxicated to the point where production had to be halted. Gig was fired, and Gene Wilder became the new head coach. Years later, Young filed a lawsuit against the studio, alleging that they had violated his contract. Sleeping with the stars. Some players gave their roles a great deal of attention, which is unsurprising given that the comedy film was about cowboys' flatulence. Slim Pickens was one of those individuals who aspired to be Taggart, the leader of the bully gang that worked diligently to scare the residents of Rock Ridge from their town. To truly immerse himself in the character's mindset, Slim decided to sleep outside, just like a true cowboy. Even more impressive is that he did it while his Winchester was right at his side. Constant reminder that he's an outlaw. What's in a name? The title was one of the most essential things the writers had difficulty reaching a consensus on. In the beginning, the working title for this film was 10X, which is a reference to Malcolm X. However, during production, the title was ultimately changed to Black Bart. Despite this modification, the writers had an unfavorable opinion and considered the Purple Sage another possible name. Afterward, Brooks was taking a shower when he had the idea for the title Blazing Saddles coming to him. Because his wife adored it, the rest, as they say, is history. Reach for the sky. If you can believe it, Sheriff Bart was not well liked in the community. He held a gun to his head, which is an incredible act to get the inhabitants of the town to release him. It was an event during Brooks's boyhood that initially inspired him to develop this concept. When he was a child, Mel attempted to steal a water pistol and a pack of gum from a department store. Little Mel threatened the clerk by pointing the gun at him and threatening to pull the trigger when the clerk attempted to stop him. A room full of crickets. Warner Brothers Studio thought Brooks could recreate the enchantment he had created in the film The Producers. On the other hand, the movie was met with a lackluster reception during its initial screenings, and executives from the studios expressed concern about how unfunny they believed the film to be. Nevertheless, Brooks was sure that the film would be successful, and all that was required was for them to make it publicly available to the general public. Warner Brothers eventually gave up and consented to distribute the film, but they were pleasantly surprised to learn that they'd been mistaken based on their initial reactions. A stingy studio. Before the film's release, Brooks was in a position where he needed to exert a great deal of effort to persuade the studio of the potential of the film. The person in charge of distribution stated, "It's simply too vulgar for the people of the United States." When the president, John Calley, decided that the movie should initially be released in a select number of cities, he said, "Let's dump it and take a loss." Examples of these cities are New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. A few months later, after the summer, it was the most successful blockbuster the studio had ever produced. Bringing in a comedic genius. While Brooks was working on the screenplay for Blazing Saddles, he was simultaneously in the process of developing a television show that was going to be called Your Show of Shows. The inspiration came to him in New York after seeing Richard Pryor perform at the Vanguard nightclub on a particular occasion. When the comedian and Pryor first met, they immediately hit it off, and Brooks offered Pryor a role in the film. The rest, as they say, was history, and Pryor was the mastermind behind its success. He wrote the majority of Mongo's dialogue. The Gridiron Gang. It's possible that Hedley Lamar, played by Harvey Korman, did not successfully remove Sheriff Bart from his position with the dispatch of Mongo. On the other hand, Alex Karras enjoyed great success as a football player during his prime. Karras had an incredible 12 seasons of playing in the NFL. Karras was selected for the All-Pro squad 9 times. In the 1960s, he was even chosen for the All-Decade team in the NFL. In addition, he was selected to the Pro Bowl 4 times. But after leaving the Detroit Lions, he decided to pursue a career in acting and initially joined the cast of Webster. The franchise that never was. The humorous screenplay that Andrew Bergman wrote was one of the most critical factors contributing to Blazing Saddles' success. His work was utilized in producing new content, such as the television series Black Bart, after the movie achieved such a high level of success. Louis Gossett Jr. played the role of Bart in the premiere episode, which was broadcast on April 4, 1975. Unbelievably, the show continued to tape, even though it was never shown to the general public. The reason was that the contract provision was making the show, and an official sequel was being prepared. Musical chairs. Brooks has always been a creative genius when it comes to accomplishing things using a method that's not conventional. This was applicable when he wanted to employ music in the foreground rather than playing music in the background, which is more standard practice. Because of this, he decided to go with Count Basie, who's widely considered one of the most talented band leaders available. He used Basie and his band to perform the song April in Paris in the film so that it might be heard. In a remarkable turn of events, Brooks was also responsible for writing the theme song for the film, which Frankie Lane ultimately performed. Your Name is My Name. Hedley Lamar was the ideal antagonist for Blazing Saddles, which Mel Brooks had created since he was the appropriate actor. However, it was unfortunate that his character's name bore a striking resemblance to a well-known actress who had been under contract with MGM from the 1930s to the 1950s. Harvey Korman had joked that the likeness to Hedy Lamar's name would result in a lawsuit, but Hedy Lamar was not thrilled by these similarities. However, the two parties were able to settle out of court. A child arrived just the other day. The birth of Mel Brooks' son Max occurred when he had initially begun working on the script for Blazing Saddles movie. Because Brooks was experiencing a financial shortfall then, he felt driven to make the film successful. He admitted that he felt a bit like Charles Dickens when he took on a project merely for the money, even though he didn't want to give the impression that he was selling out by accepting any old project. Because of this, Brooks was adamant about ensuring the movie was high quality. The uninvited extra. When the film is over, Sheriff Bart and the Waco Kid are being pursued through the backlot on which the Warner Brothers movie was made. The sequence is considered one of the film's most memorable scenes. As soon as they pass through the gates, they break through the suspension of disbelief, and everyone turns right except one person. It turned out that the individual in question was a random pedestrian who had discovered himself on the set and was confused about the directions to leave. Brooks permitted him to remain once he had him sign off on the appearance. You're fired. Earlier than the beginning of filming for Blazing Saddles, Madeline Kahn had already been in the cast for the role of Mame in the film adaptation of the novel. Lucille Ball and B. Arthur were some of the stars of the Mame adaptation based on the Broadway musical of the same name. Madeline was terminated from her position at Mame just one day before the start of her work on Blazing Saddles. Ball asserted that Kahn had intended to be fired for poor performance to free herself up and concentrate on portraying the role of Lily Von Stupp. There's magic in the air on Broadway. It was after the success of the Broadway production of The Producers that he was approached with the idea of bringing Blazing Saddles to the Great White Way theatrical stage. Although Brooks plans to accomplish this, he's concerned that the risque content will no longer be acceptable. Using the N-word, he stated, is pretty dangerous stuff, according to him. It's something that I would not shy away from, but I'm not sure if I'd be able to get away with it. At that time, I was able to get away with it. He said, I don't know if I could get away with it today. If I may say so myself. In recognition of his hilarious work on Blazing Saddles, Mel Brooks has received a great deal of praise. He couldn't help but say that he believes to be one of the funniest movies of all time. And he said so without considering the implications of his statement. Brooks commented on the film by saying, Billy Wilder's film is hilarious, but scene for scene, there are more laughs in my movie. This was about the comparison between the two films. It's not appropriate for me to say this, but I genuinely believe that this has the potential to be the most hilarious movie ever produced. Legging it out. While casting Madeline Kahn in the character of Lily Von Stupp, Brooks had his sights set on her because he was confident in her ability to deliver funny lines. Brooks, on the other hand, requested to see her legs when she came to take the audition for the part. Kahn assumed his intentions were not entirely honorable and responded, "Oh, you're that kind of guy." Brooks then clarified that the role was a parody of Marlene Dietrich and, as a result, required great legs. She had an understanding, but she cautioned him, no touching. The choice Pryor to Cleveland. Initially, Mel Brooks intended to cast comedian Richard Pryor as Sheriff Bart. Pryor is a very controversial figure, as he was quite filthy in his content and also had substance addiction issues that almost led to him burning himself to death. Mel was extremely impressed with the comic, claiming he was the most blessed with talent. However, Pryor is a very controversial person. Despite everything that had happened, Brooks continued to want Pryor, but the studio proposed Cleavon Little instead. After observing how flawlessly Little performed the lines, Brooks cast Cleavon. I can't say that, can I? The character of Lyle, one of the villain's goons, was portrayed by Burton Gilliam. Lyle used a racist slur to refer to Sheriff Bart in one of the lines included in the script. Given the delicate nature of the word, Burton didn't feel at ease when he attempted to use it. On the other hand, Little was aware that everything was about business, and he permitted Gilliam to proceed. On the other hand, Little did say, "If I thought you would say those words to me in any other situation, we'd go to the first city. But this is all about fun. Put your mind at ease about it." On the cutting floor. Regarding comedy, Mel Brooks was on the cutting edge of innovation. Everyone with a sense of humor was delighted, but the studio was concerned about it. Although they encouraged Brooks to delete scenes, Mel only cut the one that was the most sexually explicit. When Bart and Lily von Stupp were in her dressing room together, that was the particular moment. When trying to entice him, she extinguishes the candle and asks, "Is it true what individuals say about you?" Bart responds by saying, "I'm sorry to disappoint you, ma'am, but you're sucking on my arm." Calling on the Duke. If you make a parody, you should reference the original. In light of this, Mel concluded that he should incorporate the iconic Western actor John Wayne into his film. On the Warner Brothers lot, it appears that the two individuals met by coincidence, and John informed Mel that he'd heard about Mel's film. In the end, John rebuffed Mel's offer to write a short piece for Wayne, saying, "Nah, I can't do a movie like that, but I'll be first in line to see it." Mel's contribution was ultimately rejected. Quid pro quo. During the early stages of their working relationship, Mel and the great Gene Wilder, an outstanding comedian, began working together on a short film called The Producers. When Mel expressed interest, Wilder made a deal for Mel to cast Gene in Blazing Saddles. If Brooks were to review a script that Gene had begun writing and turn it into a picture, Gene stated that he would be willing to appear in Mel's project. Mel agreed. Which script is it? It was the picture Young Frankenstein, nominated for an Academy Award. Who passed gas? Mel's humor frequently takes the form of slapstick and is always hilarious. People have been seen falling, hitting their heads on windowsills, and overall getting wounded as a result of his actions. Additionally, he was a pioneer in the field of another slapstick gag, which was the incorporation of farting sounds in the film Blazing Saddles. In the notorious scene, cowboys are seen lounging around a campfire, eating baked beans and drinking coffee. This is a reference to a common stereotype. Mel believed it was unavoidable for the cowboys' bellies to rumble, and he decided to make it happen on screen. Musical half-truths. You might sometimes have to tell a little white lie to get what you want. One of the things that Mel Brooks did to Frankie Lane, the composer of the score for Blazing Saddles, was to do precisely this. For over 75 years, Lane has been a singer and a songwriter. This is longer than some people even live. At the beginning of his career as a composer, Lane thought that the Western was more of a dramatic genre than a parody. Mel did not disclose to Lane that the film was a comedy because Brooks was concerned that Lane might alter the songs if he knew from the beginning that the film was humorous. Hidden reference. While developing the script for Blazing Saddles, Mel Brooks meticulously considered every word. Every single word was written with a specific purpose in mind, whether it would make you laugh, weep, or simply add something to the story in some way. As an excellent illustration, consider the scenario in which Mongo rides into town on his horse, and you overhear a Mexican man screaming, "Mongo, it's Santa Maria!" This line is a tribute to Mongo Santa Maria, a well-known Cuban jazz artist, and Brooks added it particularly to reference him directly. A Mel Brooks sing-along. In the sequence that occurs towards the end of the movie, when Hedley Lamar and his men ride into a phony town that the sheriff and the Waco Kid put up, there's a brief minute in which the camera cuts away from the action. Lily von Stupp and a group of German troops are filming themselves singing a drinking song as they enter town. The camera then pans to show them. They sang the same drinking song that Gene Wilder and Zero Mostel sang with Kenneth Mars during The Producers. They were singing the same tune. A chocolate-covered treat for life. After Harvey Korman stops at the movie theater at the very end of the movie to purchase some concessions, product placement in the film can go a long way, and this was the case in this particular instance. When he was in the midst of all the confusion, he decided to stop and purchase a box of Raisinets. Brooks acknowledged that this decision increased product sales. The following expert from an interview he gave to Playboy in 1975. "We mentioned Raisinets in Blazing Saddles, and now the company sends me a gross of them every month. The Raisinets are a plethora." Shout it out loud. Writing the script for Blazing Saddles was not as straightforward as one might have thought because so many people were competing to incorporate their ideas. Blazing Saddles was more or less written in the middle of a drunken fistfight, claimed Brooks, the book's author. It was 5 of us, and we were all shouting at the top of our lungs for our ideas to be incorporated into the film. In addition to being the most vocal, I was fortunate enough to have the authority as director to decide what was included and what was left out. The Waco casting disaster. Because Gene Wilder played the iconic Waco Kid in the comedy, it's difficult to imagine anyone else playing it. Nevertheless, Brooks initially extended the offer of employment to several other performers, one of them being Johnny Carson. The host of the late-night television show declined the position, and Gig Young was offered the opportunity to play it. Although he was supposed to play the intoxicated Waco Kid on screen, it appears that his issues with drinking off-screen hampered his performance on set. As a result, he was dropped from the role and Wilder was cast in his place. Fart art. In the same way that Brooks gave meticulous consideration to every word and reference in his script, he was well aware of what he was doing when he incorporated more than one reference to farts in the movie. Joseph Pujol, a flatulence artist who performed under the stage name Le Pétomane, inspired the role of Governor Le Pétomane, which he played in the show. Because he had such strong abdominal muscles, the French performer could pass gas whenever commanded. His name is a fart maniac because the word Peter in French means fart, and the suffix "main" means maniac. Together, these two words form the moniker Fart Maniac. Not in the script. The comedy was famous for its delightful written lines that were funny, but one remark stood out from the others. In response to the town citizens' hostility toward Bart, Waco Kid offered him some consolation by stating, "You have to keep in mind that these are regular farmers. These are the indigenous people of the land. This is the typical clay found throughout the New West. You know, morons," was the final part of the statement that was improvised. And it was, morons that caused Cleavon Little to show genuine tears of laughter. If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon